broadcast. We are going to the stage in 1, 2, ready. Hi guys, I'm back here with Roman Pichler, the product leader, and I myself use a lot of his material and books, and he's an excellent product leader. So here he is to deliver his keynote on stakeholder management, and you should definitely listen to it without blinking an eye. Not going anywhere, right? So with that said, Roman, thank you very much for your time and giving us your time and coming here virtually and presenting this. And the stage is yours. I'll be back watching you if you need any help.
Thank you, Nanda. Thank you for the kind introduction and lovely to be with you. I'd like to share some thoughts on how to deal with stakeholders, particularly those stakeholders that we may find difficult. And so I offer some guidelines and techniques, and in a way encourage you to embrace the fact that leading and guiding people is part and parcel of the job of a Scrum product owner. So I've got a few slides. No, wrong button. I'll try again. I've got a few slides prepared, so I'll try and share them with you. And so hopefully you could all see a slide that says dealing with difficult stakeholders. It seems so cool. Good. So when I meet somebody who I find difficult, then there is usually an element of disagreement or friction. I might disagree with the views of the individual, or I might disagree with the person's behavior, maybe find it not quite appropriate, maybe find the views wrong in some way. So there's an element of conflict, you could say. Now, conflict is natural, right? It happens routinely at work and at home. It simply means that two or more people experience a clash of interests and are, well, in disagreement. Now, if conflict is natural, then what's the big deal for Scrum product owners? Well, I think that due to their role, Scrum product owners tend to experience quite a bit of conflict. And so conflict management, conflict resolution, I feel, is a particularly important skill for those of us who work as product owners in Scrum. So I've started to talk about the role, the different groups of people who we interact with as Scrum product owners. There are the users and customers. And users don't always have the same perspectives and the same needs as the customers. And depending on your product, you might potentially serve a rather large, diverse market. So there might be some friction and disagreement there. And then we interact and guide the business stakeholders. So that might be individuals from marketing, sales, support, service, operations, finance, possibly. And these individuals, they come from different business units, and hence they're likely to have different views, and they're likely to have different goals or motives. And so again, there might be an element of heterogeneity. Heterogeneity, is that a word? Diversity might be more appropriate, and disagreement. And finally, we interact with one or more development teams. And as you all know, I'm sure you all know, development teams in Scrum are cross-functional. And a cross-functional development team means that people have different skills. And having different skills sometimes gives rise to different viewpoints. And again, so there can be an element of a disagreement and friction there. And as Scrum product owners, we're right in the middle, interacting again with the users and customers, leading the business stakeholders and guiding the development teams. Unfortunately, most of the conflicts that I've experienced at work weren't handled particularly skillfully. Many were ignored or suppressed. And when that happens, conflicts leave behind a trail of bruised feelings and mistrust. On the positive side, when we learn to constructively deal with conflict and resolve disagreements, then they can become a source of creativity and innovation for our products. They can actually strengthen connections, and they can help us learn more about ourselves. So to make my talk a little bit more concrete, I thought I'd share a story with you, which is taken from my new book called How to Lead in Product Management. And there are two personas in this story. There's Sophie, and she's the head of sales. And there is a person called you. And that you is meant to be the product owner in charge of the product. So I'll read this out to you. Listen, I really need you to add this feature to the release, and I'm not going to take no for an answer, says Sophie, the head of sales. You can feel your shoulders tensing and your stomach tightening. There is no way that you can add more work to the development effort. The dev team is already struggling with the current workload. But Sophie is a powerful senior manager who will not be afraid to escalate the issue. What should you do? So it turns out that commonly we use 4 strategies to deal with conflict. And while these strategies are very popular, they are unfortunately not particularly helpful. These 4 strategies that I'm going to share with you now are based on the work of Oren J. Sofer. The first strategy is called competitive confrontation. And as it says here, it means engaging directly with some aggression or force. So I could say to Sophie, this is impossible, what you're demanding here. You know very well that the development team is really overwhelmed with the current workload. We're committed to a specific release goal for the next 3 months. And who are you? You come here and you speak to me in that way and you interrupt my work. I'm not going to have this, and no, and that's my final answer. Now, if that's a smart way to respond to Sophie, I'll leave that answer up to you. But I've certainly seen product owners use competitive confrontation in a situation of conflict and disagreement. Now, this strategy is based on the assumption that I'm right and Sophie's wrong, right? And Sophie's the one who's to blame. She started it all. I mean, why does she kind of demand this feature out of the blue? It's just unbelievable. And I need to protect my interests here, right? Any empathy I show will be used against me and seen as a sign of weakness. And I'll try and win, right? I'll try and win and put Sophie in her place. So competitive confrontation is a winning strategy, you could say. So is the second one, passive aggression. Only this time we don't engage directly and don't seek an open conflict. We believe that wouldn't be advantageous. But we employ guerrilla tactics. So we engage indirectly. So, we might try and be difficult to work with and not really commit to anything. And we might say to Sophie, what you're asking is extremely difficult, as I'm sure you understand. The development team is super busy. I can't really, commit to anything at this stage. I'll have to get back to you on this, but I can promise you to add it to the product backlog, and I'll have to go and talk to the development team and then take it from there. And then maybe I could go to the development team and, say, guess what just happened? Sophie demanded that we add this feature. I add this feature to the product backlog, but don't worry, I'll deprioritize it straight away. We'll never get to it. And I might talk badly about Sophie, possibly also to other product owners, and say like, oh, have you worked with Sophie before? Oh my God, she's horrible. Stay clear of her, avoid her. Oh no, she's terrible. And in that way, again, try and get the better of Sophie and win. So again, it's very much based on the assumption I need to try and win, and I'm right, and Sophie is therefore wrong. The other 2 strategies are less about winning. They're more about minimizing our losses. And the third one is called conflict avoidance. And an example of conflict avoidance would be if I said, is this really such a big deal here? I mean, let's look at this, in a rational way. And let's try and have a can-do attitude. Let's try and be helpful. Sophie, she's a senior stakeholder. Usually she, there's a very good reason why she does something, and she's well respected in the organization. If she needs that feature, then, I'm sure, there's a very good reason. And, in fact, we can go and ask her. So maybe as it's impossible to implement this feature in the current release, we can sort of split the difference and do part of it now, maybe half of it, or a third at least. And that way, she gets a little bit and we can help her a little bit. And at the same time, that might just be possible to do. And some of you might say, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that. And I think when we look at it superficially, it sounds quite a good approach, maybe. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't address the real issues of the conflict. So if I was the product owner in charge and Sophie came to me and spoke to me that way, there'd be two real issues that I'd have with this behavior. The first one is I wouldn't feel respected as the person in charge of the product. I wouldn't feel that Sophie treats me as an empowered Scrum product owner, but really much more like her personal assistant. She comes here and she demands a feature and she says she's not going to accept no for an answer. I mean, I don't think that's a helpful and appropriate way to speak to someone, certainly not to somebody who's meant to be in charge of the product and ensure that the value of the product is maximized. So again, I think Scrum product owners deserve some respect. And secondly, I would expect that any organization that uses product management roles, like a Scrum product owner, would have some product management processes established and would have a way to review features, and particularly new features, in the context of a product roadmap and an overarching product strategy. So I would expect that every 2 to 3 months you get together and have ideally a collaborative strategy review workshop where you look at the strategy, you look at the roadmap, and you decide together if you should make any adaptations, any changes in what those changes are. So if I now try and compromise with Sophie, then I'll allow her to expedite her feature. And I may have to explain to the other stakeholders why I did that. Right? I mean, what makes Sophie and her feature special? And in addition to that, if I go and try and strike a deal with her, I indirectly approve of her behavior, or at least, I let her get away with what I would consider unhelpful behavior. And so that might set a precedence. And she might act in similar ways in the future. And even worse, other stakeholders might copy her behavior. So I don't think that conflict avoidance and trying to broker a compromise here would be really helpful. And nor would be passivity. And passivity would mean that I say, what should I do? I'm just a little product owner here. There's Sophie, and she's so much more powerful than me. And she's really well networked in the organization. And of course, I can try and stand up to her and say no, but there's no point. If I try and say no to her, then a few minutes later, my boss will come to me and say, Roman, you're going to do it. Make it happen. So I don't have a choice. I might as well just say yes. And it's going to be really difficult. I don't know what I should say to the development team. I don't know. I might have to sort of persuade them to work a little bit longer or come in at the weekends or something. And I know that's not good, but I don't have a choice. So, and again, I don't think that's a helpful strategy. It means that I would basically give up my needs and essentially be submissive to Sophie. And even worse, it's not only my needs that I give up, but I also give up the needs of the development team, and I'm willing to sacrifice sustainable pace, the sustainable pace of the development team. So none of those 4 strategies is really helpful. Well, if that's the case, what could then help us? Well, it turns out that the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the United States, experienced a similar, even though admittedly much more extreme challenge. So imagine that you are faced with the following situation. Armed terrorists have kidnapped a group of civilians. And they are now asking for ransom, and they are threatening to kill the hostages if their demands are not fulfilled. Now, if you grew up as I did in the 1980s and you watched the Rambo movies, you might say, what's the big deal? Send in a special agent who can single-handedly free the hostages and capture the baddies. Apparently, the FBI have tried this approach with a low success but a high death rate. So over the years, they've developed something else, and this something else is called the behavioral change stairway model, which I'd like to briefly introduce to you. So no matter if we're dealing with armed terrorists or a difficult senior stakeholder like Sophie, I would suggest what we'd like to achieve is a positive behavior change, right? So I think it'd be wonderful if Sophie realized that it's a good idea to treat Scrum product owners with some respect and, well, respect their authority and not just demand and be pushy. And yes. And secondly, I think it'd be a good idea if Sophie respected the established product management processes and showed up at one of the strategy review meetings, or maybe one of her team members, one of the sales rep shows up. So I think that'd be lovely. The problem, of course, we have as Scrum product owners is that we're not the boss of the stakeholders. We don't have what is referred to as transactional power. We can't just tell Sophie what to do. And worse, we're usually not in a position to offer any incentives, like a bonus or pay rise. So how can we encourage that behavior change then? Well, the answer is by exercising influence, by getting Sophie to open up to our perspective and our needs and our ideas, our advice, so that she follows that advice and she follows our lead. But how do we do that? How do we get Sophie to follow our advice? Well, the answer is by earning her trust, by building rapport, a trustful connection with her. Only if she trusts us will she be willing to truly listen to us and act upon our advice. Yeah. Now, of course, that then leads to the question, how do we build trust with Sophie? And a key trust-building technique is to empathize with her. And to empathize means reaching out to Sophie with warm-heartedness, taking a genuine interest in why she's requesting that feature, why this feature is so important to her, how she is, how she's feeling about this. It's the opposite of aversion. It's the opposite of feeling angry or having ill will and thinking, "Oh, Sophie, oh, what a horrible woman! Oh, I hate her." So it's it's again being open and being warm-hearted, cultivating a positive attitude towards Sophie, no matter if we agree with what she's saying, and no matter if we agree with her behavior or if we particularly like her. So we can be empathic with somebody, even if we very much disagree with the individual's perspective, and if we don't particularly like the person. It just means being accepting, and it means cultivating a warm-hearted attitude, as I've said. Now, how do we strengthen empathy? A key technique is to listen actively, to make a real effort to listen to Sophie and refrain from starting a conversation by telling her what is wrong with her behavior and why it is impossible to implement this feature and how she should act differently in the future. It's very unlikely that she'll be able to accept that advice if we haven't built the necessary trust. And in order to build that trust, we have to empathize and first listen to her. Now, it's called a behavioral change stairway model because these steps form a process. So you first have to make an effort to listen and empathize, build trust, so you can then influence and hopefully encourage a positive behavior change. So you can't skip any of those steps and you can't speed up the process at will. It takes time. And of course, there's no guarantee that Sophie will actually change her behavior. But given the fact that we don't hold any transactional power, any formal authority over Sophie, what other options are there? Now, as active listening is the first and maybe most important step in this model, I thought I'd share 3 listening tips with you. And the first tip I'd like to share is be fully present and listen attentively. Maybe some of you are saying, okay, what's the big deal? It just means listen up, right? But I find it's sometimes challenging for me to really lead with presence and really attentively listen, give the other person my full and undivided attention. partly because as product owners, we have many competing duties, and sometimes it's just really hard to stay in the present and stay focused. But sometimes also, certainly for me, I find I listen not so much with the intention to understand, but with the intention to answer, to respond, as Stephen Covey once put it. And so, again, being there and fully listening to what the person is saying can be hard, but it is very important to do. It gives the other person the feeling, makes the other person aware of the fact that we care and that we value what she or he has to say, and that we are accepting. And again, it doesn't mean that we approve. It doesn't mean that we like what we're hearing or what we're seeing, but it means that we give our time to the other person, that we give the attention to the other person, that we value the other person, and that builds trust. Now, in order to be able to listen attentively, what I've found helpful is not to rush into a difficult conversation, but maybe give myself a little bit of time, particularly if I'm feeling worked up. So, if Sophie spoke to me in the way that I described, then I think there'd be a number of difficult emotions present in me. I might feel some anger, thinking, oh my God, this is outrageous. How dare she speak to me like this? I might feel an element of confusion, not knowing quite how to respond. I might even sort of worry a little bit because I'm thinking, oh man, if I don't say anything, then that's not the right thing to do. If I stand up to her, oh God, how's that going to look like? And what are people going to think about me? And so, there might be a number of difficult emotions present, and experience tells me when that's the case, it's best for me to allow myself or give myself a little bit of time for those emotions to reside, to weaken, before I then enter a conversation. Otherwise, I might act out my emotions, and I might say something that is not helpful and something that I might regret later. So in that case, it'd be best for me, at least, to say to Sophie, look, Sophie, it's really important for me that we sort this out. And I understand this is really important for you too, but I'm feeling a little bit worked up right now. So can we please have a conversation in an hour's time, or this afternoon, or tomorrow, or whatever is appropriate. The second recommendation that I have is try and be respectfully curious, try and suspend judgment, and cultivate an open mind. Now, I think being open-minded and strengthening our capacity to be open-minded and have an open mind is really important for Scrum product owners. If we are too attached, if we cling to our preconceived ideas, then it is hard for us to discover opportunities to improve our product. I mean, if we think we know what's best for our products and we are right, then we're heavily biased. And so we may filter out and ignore any feedback that we get from users and customers. And similarly with stakeholders, if I'm biased and I think I know what's best, or if I'm biased in the sense that I have a fixed view of who Sophie is, and I've labeled her as a difficult person, I've labeled her as who's somebody maybe who's annoying, possibly because she's requested features in the past and I had to decline them, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's her again. Then not only will it be hard for me to listen attentively to her and give her the feeling that I value, her contribution, even if I may disagree with it, but I also might miss the opportunity to learn that actually it is absolutely the right thing to do to take on this feature. Absolutely, yeah. We must implement the feature. We must start working on it now. Really, oh yeah, this is crucial. Thank God, thank God, Sophie, that you raised the issue and made me aware of it. I might just sort of again, because I'm so biased and I'm so attached to my ideas. I might just ignore that and not let it happen, and that'd be a shame. And finally, try not to be overly critical when somebody is making a suggestion, but try and do what I think is a very good practice in product management: separate data collection from data analysis. So first try and listen to what the person has to say, and take a deep breath and think about it and do a little bit of analysis, and then decide how to best respond to it. And finally, listen not only for facts, but also for feelings and needs. Facts is, of course, what Sophie is saying. She's requesting this feature, but in order to understand why this is happening and how to best respond, I think it's very helpful to become aware of what emotions are present in Sophie. So say that Sophie speaks rather loudly to me and she's got a red face, then she might that indicates that she might be upset. So emotions usually play out through body language, facial gestures, for instance, tone of our voice, and so forth. So pay attention to that. And then feelings are often gateways to the underlying needs. In order to be able to resolve a conflict, it's typically necessary to understand what's at play here. Why is this really important, and why is this really difficult for the other person? What is the need or the unmet need that the other person has? So in the case of Sophie, why is it so important to her personally, this feature? What's in it for her? What's driving the behavior? What's the real reason that she's requesting or demanding this feature and acting in the way she's acting right now? And what can help you with finding out the underlying needs are open questions, questions that typically start with why, how, or what. So you could say, for instance, please help me understand, Sophie, why the feature is so important to you, and why it's so important to you to have it implemented more or less straight away. So I hope that these listening tips were a little bit helpful for you, and I'd like to now start summarizing my short talk, and just make you aware that dealing with difficult people, no matter if we like it or not, is part and parcel of being a Scrum product owner. We have a job that requires us to interact with all these different groups of people, and we have a job that requires us to offer some guidance and leadership to the stakeholders and development teams. And hence, it's only natural that we will experience disagreement and we will experience conflict. And I think it'd be a mistake to say, like, oh yeah, I know, there's some ongoing conflicts that I need to address, and there's some relationship and trust building I need to do, but I've got so much real work that takes precedence, that has higher priority. I first need to rework the product roadmap, then I need to reprioritize the product backlog, then I need to look at some new user stories, and then I need to analyze some data, then I need to do this. So I think attending to the people issues that are part of our work is as important as other aspects, and it'd be a mistake not to address conflicts. As you are probably aware of anyway, unresolved conflicts don't just go away. They tend to linger, and when that happens, they affect the relationships. So it'd be hard for me if I don't resolve the conflict with Sophie to trust her, and it'd be hard for me to work together with her in a productive manner. And probably every time I'd see her, possibly every time somebody mentions her name, I might have negative thoughts and negative feelings arising, which would impact my mental well-being. So I think it's kind of in our best interest to try and resolve conflicts. And finally, acquiring the skill, the ability to to resolve conflicts, is a key leadership skill in my mind that as product owners we should actively develop. It strengthens connections, improves the work environment, and it helps us grow as individuals and leaders. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your attention. I hope you found what I had to say a little bit helpful. Now, if you'd like to learn more about my thoughts on product ownership and specifically product leadership, please check out my website. I recently published a new book called How to Lead in Product Management that offers much more advice and guidance on how to lead the stakeholders and the development team. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions right now. But if for whatever reason your question doesn't get answered, then please reach out to me and just send me your question via email. Thank you again.
Wow, that's excellent talk. Okay, so we have few questions here. So what I would suggest everyone, guys, write your questions now so that they're at the end of the chat so that we can read and even Roman can look at and choose to answer whatever he wanted to answer. But I have a couple of things based on what people already asked. The one is, you're talking about product leadership, product ownership plus leadership, which is some of the coaching, facilitation, understanding the human behavior. So we teach the same thing to Scrum Master also. My question here is, how much of product owner need to have those skills compared to Scrum Master? Are they at the same level or they don't have to be at the same level? What's your take on that?
Yeah, nice question, Nanda. Thank you for asking it. So I think the difference between product owners and Scrum Masters, in my mind, is that Scrum Masters should be able to teach conflict resolution. I don't know if they should be, but it might be helpful for a Scrum Master to be able to teach how to resolve conflicts to development teams and product owners. Whereas I don't expect a product owner to be able to teach conflict resolution, but I think it's helpful for a product owner to understand what techniques are there in order to skillfully deal with conflict, so that a product owner just doesn't experience conflict and in a way feels overwhelmed, but that we're equipped, right? We're equipped with some techniques. We've got the skills to constructively handle the situation rather than just possibly, using one of the four unhelpful, ineffective conflict strategies that I shared earlier.
Okay.
But I mean, you're certainly right in that sense that, Scrum Masters have a very strong people focus. I think part of being a Scrum Master is being a coach. And the people focus with product people, with product owners, sometimes is a little bit lost. As the name suggests, as product owners, we should focus on the product. And I tend to say, don't make the mistake of trying to manage the development team. But what you should do is you should lead the product. But in order to lead the product and progress it, we need to create some alignment, which means we need to offer some form of guidance, and we need to find ways how we can help the stakeholders and the development team move together in the same direction.
Okay. So what areas a product owner needs to look at to be a successful product owner? That's one of the questions that's on.
So I like to think about so for me, it sounds like it's a question around product owner skills. And so I like to break product owner skills down into 3 areas. I think it's helpful to have tactical skills. So the ability to work with a product backlog and prioritize it, for instance, and update items, maybe write user stories with the development team, interact with the development team, give feedback on work results, elicitate feedback from users on product increments, analyze data, to run some experiments around new functionality or enhanced functionality, maybe also write some personas or other user models. But then I think in addition to those skills, it's helpful to be able to own and take responsibility for the strategic aspects of the product. So being able to understand how the product creates value and why people want to use it and interact with it, and who those individuals are, what makes the product stand out, and what the business goals are, maybe how the product is monetized if it's a commercial product. So what's the underlying business model, and what about a product plan, a product roadmap that describes the desired outcomes or benefits or goals a product should achieve or create over the coming 6, 9, 12 months. So those will be then sample strategic skills. And these 2 groups together form what I would consider the key hard skills for product owners. But I think then there's another group of skills, the leadership, I would call them leadership skills or people skills, or the soft skills, such as cultivating empathy and being an empathic person, trust building, active listening, and the ability to lead a development team and stakeholders by setting the right goals and getting agreement on those goals. So collaborative decision making, for instance. So those will all be techniques that I feel are just as important, and skills, I should say, that are just as important as the hard skills. And in a way, they bring the hard skills truly to life. So, if you can be brilliant at creating a product strategy, you can be brilliant at prioritizing the product backlog, but if you struggle to connect with the individuals, if you struggle to listen, if you struggle to understand the stakeholders or the development team members, then you're probably not going to see much buy-in, much support for your strategy and for your product backlog.
Okay, great. I have one more question here. If there is a business value standpoint, there is a difference between the stakeholders and the product owner's perspective. How do product owners deal with that?
Yeah, nice question. Thank you for asking it. So I think whenever there is disagreement, it's kind of helpful, that's at least what I find, to look at the issue that is being said, and then listen for everything else that isn't being said. So if I think the feature that Sophie's requested doesn't really have a significant impact to the desired outcome of the next major release or the next product version, of what we want to achieve for over the next 2 to 3 months, but Sophie thinks it's going to have a massive impact and it's going to have a massive positive business impact, then it'd be good to talk about it, and the various ways how we can analyze it, how we can look at cost benefit, for instance. We can look at cost of delay. We can look at the impact to, say, customer satisfaction, or depending on what our specific goals are that we have with our product. But I think if there are difficult emotions present in this conversation and there's something else going on, and so there's a conflict going on, and in order to resolve that conflict, it's important to understand, why am I emotionally involved? Why do I feel very strongly, for instance, that what Sophie is saying is utterly wrong? Oh, no, she's completely wrong. Why is that? And so there must be something else happening, and I think it's worthwhile becoming aware of it, and then trying to address it, because if we just stay at the surface, if we just sort of do a cost benefit analysis, then I might agree with Sophie, or she might agree with me, but I'm unlikely to be happy if I'm still emotionally unhappy, if there's still another reason why there's disagreement and there's friction and there's conflict.
Okay, so is it a good idea to prove to the stakeholders why it is the product owner's perspective they have? Like, is there any cheaper way to validate which way is right, or is there anything they should try or not?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I sort of a while back I saw a T-shirt that said "Stop arguing, start testing." So I think that's a great motto to have. But I mean, what I like to suggest generally is to engage the stakeholders early and often in the process, and that starts by inviting the key stakeholders, the really important stakeholders, to engage in some form of product discovery activities. So to help figure out, are we addressing the right market segment? Are we creating the right value for the users? Is our product sufficiently differentiated? Are the business goals right, and are they realistic? Is the business model working or likely to work? And then to continue engage the key stakeholders in strategy reviews, and also ensure that they continue to be involved with the development effort, and at least once a month attend sprint review meetings. So the answer is really try and create what I like to refer to as a stakeholder community. And try and really build trust with the stakeholders and encourage the stakeholders to collaborate. And I think once people get to know each other, and once people have started to understand each other and build trust, then making decisions together and clarifying any questions and sorting out disagreements will become so much easier. Yeah. So I think it's always particularly difficult to work with the stakeholders when you have stakeholders who come and go, or stakeholders that aren't properly involved, or stakeholders who simply do not understand the process and do not understand the role of a Scrum product owner, which sometimes is related to the maturity of Scrum and product management in the organization. So if the organization's only fairly recently started to use Scrum, and historically it's never had any product management function, then often stakeholders just unaware of the respect and authority empowerment that Scrum product owners deserve, and sometimes think, oh, it's just a little project manager. I'll just have to put her or him under pressure, and she or he does what I want her or him to do. And if that's the case, then I'd say send in the Scrum Master. This is where the Scrum Master becomes in very handy for the product owners as a strong partner to help educate the stakeholders and help with organizational change and development.
Yeah, I think that answers another question somebody asked. What should be the professional relationship between the Scrum Master and the product owner? Partners. So they're partners in the game, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it should be a healthy partnership, really. I really view personally the Scrum Master as an important partner for the Scrum product owner. And it's unfortunate that in my work, I quite often meet product owners who don't have a Scrum Master, who don't have a Scrum Master who's sufficiently available or qualified. And I think that makes the work of the product owner much harder, and in some cases unsustainable. In some cases, it means that the product owner takes on some of the Scrum Master responsibilities, and for a short period of time, that might be perfectly okay. But as a permanent solution, I think it's wrong, because being a Scrum product owner is a challenging job. I find it a very rewarding job, but it's a challenging job. There's lots to it, and it's a tough job. It's tough to be a good, effective, competent Scrum product owner. If we then add to this some Scrum Master responsibilities, I think it's just likely to get too much. And so either it becomes unsustainable and unhealthy, or Scrum product owners neglect some of their core responsibilities. And often that's around product discovery and product strategy. And that work then doesn't get done. But neither is desirable, right? And so then often it's better to recognize actually what we have here is a real issue, an organizational impediment, and escalate it, let it bubble up, rather than kind of trying to cover and hide the fact. So I'm not suggesting you shouldn't care. In fact, it's great, when you care about the development team and the process. But I don't think it's healthy to be essentially product owner and Scrum Master, even if it's a partial Scrum Master for an extended period of time.
Okay, great.
It's easy for me to say, of course.
Yeah, it's okay with you. I have a couple of more questions. The one question is around, if you are a product owner for an organization dealing with multiple vendors, so that means the suppliers, the teams, maybe even Scrum Masters come from the vendor organizations, whereas you belong to the client organization. So what are some of the things you need to really do it there to make it a success?
Yeah, interesting question. Thank you for asking it. So I can only obviously speak, or share advice based on my own experience. And my experience suggests that when you have a development team that is from say a supplier organization or partner organization, then often it takes a little bit more time to establish trust and get to know each other, and to be able to work together effectively. And in order to build trust and be able to effectively collaborate, I think it's very healthy to work together with the same people for an extended period of time. So for instance, my website is designed and developed by an agency based on the south coast of the UK. And I've been working with that agency now, I think, for about 10 years or so, and for an extended period of time with the same people. And that's great because, we managed to get to know each other. I know how the agency works. They know how my business works. And, we trust each other. And if there are any issues, then, there's still issues and it's still unpleasant. But, usually we're able to sort it out pretty quickly and in a constructive manner. So I think it's always a real issue when you work with a supplier team and the team members, they just change. So it's an issue on a personal level, building those trustful connections, but it's also an issue on a productivity level. It usually means there's quite a hefty loss of knowledge, caused by all the handoffs that you have.
Yep. And also, we see probably the organizational politics and people fighting between different organizations and all that stuff.
That can
So,
happen, yes.
yeah, that can creep into the value, I mean, less value of the product, right? Yeah. So one last question. This is a more very generic question. So knowing that there are lots of CSM certificates and lot fewer product owner certificates, what would be your outlook on the product owner role?
Well, I think that the product owner role, the Scrum product owner role, is fairly often, commonly misunderstood. And unfortunately, from my perspective, Scrum product owners are sometimes seen as primarily tactical people who work with development teams, a little bit like, I don't know, a product backlog manager or user story writer. But that's not the focus. That shouldn't be the focus of the Scrum product owner role. My understanding of how the product owner role is intended in Scrum is as the person who ensures or is responsible for maximizing the value the product creates. So the person who should ensure that the product becomes successful or stays successful. So that's a different focus than, working day in, day out with the development team, managing the product backlog and feeding development team members with, beautifully crafted, detailed, embellished user stories. So I think that there's a real issue around understanding what the Scrum product owner role is, and I hope that in the future will be a little bit clearer. I mean, I've certainly started in my work to differentiate between a Scrum product owner and a safe product owner, because I feel that a safe product owner is a completely different role to a Scrum product owner. And unfortunately, both roles are called product owner. But yeah, as I said, my perspective is they're very, very different. So as a Scrum product owner, really do focus on the value piece. Don't forget things like product discovery and product strategy. Make sure you do spend enough time with the development team, but equally, spend sufficient time with the stakeholders, and particularly with the users and customers, and try and reach out to users and customers and meet people at least online once a quarter as a rule of thumb. And don't be a product backlog manager. Don't be a user story writer.
Yeah, just now somebody asked, what's your opinion on proxy product owner? Probably answered already. Not even a product owner, right? So,
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's a little bit like, product owner covering Scrum Master duties. If it's for a short period of time, it can be okay, But I think if a proxy product owner, if you have somebody who, as a long-term solution where essentially you have two people now involved in product ownership, one person who has the strategic responsibilities as the real product owner, and then a proxy product owner, somebody who essentially then translates the ideas of the actual product owner, that sometimes that's a customer or client, into product backlog items and communicates them to the development team, then you have the role split. Whereas the idea in Scrum is, and I think it's an important one to understand, that there is full stack ownership. So product owners, Scrum product owners, should own a product from top to bottom, from the vision over the strategy down to the execution piece. Or to put it differently, as a Scrum product owner, I should be involved in discovery and strategy and vision, but I should also be sufficiently involved in execution to make sure everything hangs together. And there's a close alignment between the strategic product decisions and the tactical work, the execution. That's the idea in Scrum. That's not always possible when we work on large products. That's completely understood. But then I think we have to find ways how we can share the work without risking that there is misalignment, and that there are inconsistencies between the different levels of decision making.
Yep. All right, so that was my last question, what I just asked. And thank you very much, Roman, for joining us. And I'm really excited to see you first time in person. I mean, virtually in person. I would like to be in touch with you a lot more. Thanks for sharing your insights for our audience. And it's very, very valuable.
Well,
thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Guys, there is a poll open for the talk. You can rate it. Feel free. And again, thanks, Roman. And I'm going to stop the broadcast. Guys, we are going to have our session starting in about maybe 10 minutes. 6:45 is the set of sessions going to start. Right? Until then, take a break, have some breather, and get some coffee or something. All right. See you guys soon.